Ms. Falls, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Moriarty,
Here.
Mrs. Roberts,
I'm here.
Mrs. Powers,
Here.
Mrs. Russell,
Here.
Mrs. Pritchett.
Here. Okay, board information share. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Public comment? Do we have any public comment cards? No. Seeing none, we'll get right started with Tebow Partnership Naming Rights presentation with Jennifer DeShazo.
If you'll recall, back in November, the school board, you all approved a contract with Tebow Partnerships to explore non-traditional revenue streams and different types of corporate and business engagements that the district could possibly enter into with regards to its facilities to generate some revenue for the district. Brian Sikowski from Tebow Partnerships is here today with us. He came to our school district right before winter break, comprehensively toured all three of our high schools with the principals and athletic directors and started developing some valuations, which he's going to share with you today. And then he's going to kind of guide you through some steps that we need to take to get some decisions and direction from the board before we proceed with officially launching this with this project to our community and business partners. So, Brian?
Hello, thank you for having me back. Appreciate it. Shouldn't take 10 minutes to go through, but I definitely wanted to make sure that everyone understood and was aware of the steps we've taken to this point, and then also where we'd like to go after. In December, as Jen was saying, once we were given approval to come out, we came out right away before the break, and we're giving great tours of the schools, the high schools, to get familiar with the things that we can't learn from data, even though we do access a lot of data when we're putting these valuations together. But we went through each market, which was distinctly different, and there's a lot of benefits and challenges for each school, like there always is. And we think we've gotten very solid valuations using the formula we've used successfully for the last 10 years. And so we have looked into two very specific areas to start these programs off. And what I like to use the analogy of is kind of like you build a stock portfolio, right? Build one, which is the stadium naming rights, which is the one that's a large partnership. It's a big investment for one single group. And then on the other side, you have the opportunity for digital marketing, digital advertising for companies. And that is a lower entry point with a lot more partners that can come in and be a part of it. So these are the two. I just want to explain why we go that route. And that is to provide the analogy of a home run ball for the naming rights for partnership, but also to get the early revenue coming in and build those partnerships successfully with the community. And it's a nice entry point because what we found up to this point is this allows us also to send partner opportunities back to the schools. Right? There's going to be partners that we go reach out to, and they're not going to fit either one. They're not going to have interest in digital. They're not going to have interest in naming rights, but they may have interest in a banner at a school. And so what we'd like to do is build that up and help get that back to the school-based partnerships, which can also be successful. And then maybe at a later date, we build that partnership out. So if it's all right, I'd like to just share the kind of outline from what we had and just share some information. So as I mentioned, we did the valuations for all three high schools. And the recommendation, the process that we'd like to move forward with on this is to release one at a time to the public to build a partnership out. And a lot of reasons for that. Why we find that would be the successful route to go. And the first one that we'd like to present is Martin County High School. It is a school that's most central in the district. It has some benefits that make this a key opportunity for a partner. And the three phases of valuations Sorry. First time I've used a clicker. No. Thanks. So we like to go into the market first and just measure the media, right? Figure out who the audience is in the market, what are the opportunities out there that local companies especially, which was a focus of our conversation last time and what we've taken from our last meeting to now as something of a priority, a main priority for us in our work is to reach out to local companies and understand the market locally. So to do that, we wanted to find out like what are the percentages of the market that are reached, and we picked up that in most markets they run pretty similar to this market, right? Radio, if you have a #1 radio station in the market, normally you're hitting around 5%, right? Somewhere around there, which is great. You know, if you buy a couple stations, build out your audience, or you target in on one station. Television, at the most, we just all watched the Super Bowl, you get up around 35%. And then you have other, depending on where they are, billboards, direct mailers, right? Those can be scaled out to whatever a company would like, right? So what we do is we say, hey, you know, these traditional outlets can reach this percentage of the local market and be successful for you. But a lot of people don't know in most markets, in this market that we found from the census data, reach over 40% of the population, which is incredible, right? For the amount of opportunity, if you add up students, parents, teachers, staff, that doesn't even include alumni, right? That have also a potential for loyalty ratings in these audiences. So what we like to do is point that out first, just general market, right? To compete with the reach. And then you start to talk about the audiences. And that's where we come down to doing our due diligence, and we lay out, hey, what areas make sense? What areas, because in this program, for it to be successful and long-lived, we want to find businesses that make sense for them, it's going to work for them, and then they're going to continually come back. Right? Win-win for the school district and also the companies that are involved. So this is the main stat. When we present, I just want to share with you so you know we're out there presenting as well. 75% of brands want, or parents want brands to support schools. 64% of parents say they will actually switch brands to a company that is supporting. So we like to use that and point that out. We also make sure from the naming rights side, and this is the first one I'd like to talk about specifically, is that everything's laid out. We have a contract we've used as a starting point when we find the right partner, and in that it's very specific, right? That we talk about that up front. So a big important part of a partnership, especially if you're asking somebody to come on board for a larger amount of an investment, right? Significant investment for a significant amount of time, you know, you'd like 5 to 10 years in most cases are these agreements, is you want to make sure that you're very clear up front. So everyone's expectations at the starting point are together. So we lay it out. This is pretty much the major benefits of a partner joining that. I don't know if you could see these, read these. I need to read specifically unless you'd like to. But it's laid out pretty specific, and there are certain things when you do a walkthrough, when you find a partner that's, when we're at the area where I'm like, hey, again, you know, and Martin County School Board and leadership, we have someone that wants to come do a walkthrough. That's when we're like, hey, we've done a lot in that sales funnel. We've reached out to a lot of companies. We've had some conversations. We don't keep bringing them back unless you'd like to see them. Happy to do that. But when we get to a point where someone's doing a walkthrough, that's when we'll go through each of these. We'll work with school-based leadership in the district as well, and have them out there to make sure, one, it's doable, and two, it's of interest. So, but this is a good starting point. It helps. So here's the basic valuation. This is what we show. Like to present and be public and you when we go out there for starting conversations. If you haven't seen it yet, these numbers are based in a way where if someone comes back and wants to go through them, if you want to walk through these numbers, we can do it. We can go back and share how we get to these, and it's based on 3 things. It's based on traffic around facility, the property. It's based on school size and daily interaction with the facility, and then it's based on event numbers that the school provides us. We use that as a valuation, and this school comes in well positioned for a partner, and so this is our initial recommendation. We'd like to have conversations with the public on this one. This is a map layout of the numbers that we use for the historical data. Like I mentioned, out of the three, this just shows the area outside of the stadium and what can be viewed by traffic. So the second part of the programs that we've been working on and setting up. Yeah, we'll shut. The second part that we've been working on is the digital advertising. We've been working with your communications team here to make sure that the ad serving platform is set up and ready to go. We're pretty much ready at this point. We just have to give some more code, but we've established the code and prepared the ad server to be able to deliver digital advertising on the school district and the home pages of school websites as well. And with that, it basically just be an overview. We have a one sheet that's actually a sales sheet or a media kit sheet where we hand it out and it shows like the sizes, right? We use IAB standard sizes, which are, if you're working with a marketing department or an ad agency, they already have these sizes prepared. Companies don't really like to have to go out and custom build ads for one. We set those up, we position them on the pages, and then we give them our contact information. What we've been doing today, we spent the day in the market, and I think this is very important, is we've been going out and talking to companies that make sense, because as I mentioned in December, you have a brand that's very well positioned as well, and it's important to find those brands that align with the district in a good way. And so, and like I said at the beginning, it has to make sense for them. It has to make sense for their audience to want to come in. So I won't name specific companies yet, but I will prepare a sheet and continually update you on who we are talking to. But there are categories that we start off with and recommend, and that's like service providers, doctors, dentists, optical. They make sense, they do well. And then things that revolve around homeowners, realtors, insurance, they do very well as well. And then banking does well actually in both digital advertising and the naming rights. So one of the things we'd like to do once we have approval from the school board is to put out information on social media, and then we do a paid distribution where we target audiences in the market, especially because we're focusing on local companies, and we will target them through Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. But we have a quick advertisement that, or not advertisement, a message that was built by the communications team here. If you can, may I show that?
In Martin County, education isn't something we do, it's who we are. It's the foundation upon which our community thrives. It's the spark that ignites the potential of our future leaders. And now we're taking that commitment to the next level. We're launching a groundbreaking new program that will revolutionize how local companies can support the educational experience for our students. The Martin County School District is looking for the right partner to rename our high school stadium. This partnering individual or company will be at the center of our community. They will be with us on Friday nights, but more importantly, they will be with us for the long term. They will help our students fund the resources to foster excellence, ignite passion, and build champions on and off the field.
As a member of this community, I know how vital our schools are. They are the heart and soul of Martin County. And when business and schools work together, the magic happens.
The community agrees. A staggering 75% of people believe brands should support their local schools because investing in education isn't just good business. It's the right thing to do. And that's why smart brands are recognizing the power of partnering with education. In fact, 64% of people say they'll actually switch brands to support a company that invests in their local schools. Think about it. Over 40% of our community interacts with our schools every single day. That's an incredible opportunity to make a real difference.
This isn't just about sports. This is about creating an environment where students can explore their passions, develop their skills, and reach their full potential.
And here's a powerful fact. Schools command greater brand loyalty than even NASCAR. That's the kind of impact we're talking about.
So that would be an example of a tool, and this one, thank you again, and appreciated by the help of the communication staff creating that as well. So, and that's the way we'll reach out with email, social media, and then direct contact like I did today, just stopping in places, introducing ourselves, talking about the initiatives that are getting ready to roll out, and then finding out interest and answering questions, just being visible to the local advertisers. So one of the things that always come up, and I think you talked about here, is what do you do when the funds start coming in, right? Where do they go? So I just laid out a couple ways that I've seen it done from other districts that we've worked with. And so I've presented 3 up there, if that is helpful. So when I talk about 50% distributed monthly to all schools, normally that's all schools. And this is the digital funding, because normally the way it's broken out is a little different from digital funding to athletic stadium naming rights. So this is digital funding specifically. So first one's all schools, 50%. 50% goes to a general fund that the district holds. Second way I've seen it go, where all 100% goes right to the general fund. And third is just different ways you see fit, depending on your breakout that you choose. Those 2 on this one are common, is where half goes out to the school because they're maintaining the content on the website. It motivates them, right? Because if you're not updating your website and taking advantage of that tool, you're not going to demand traffic. You're not going to have as much value. Any questions on this one, or do you?
Thank you, Brian. I have a couple questions. So the other districts that you're working with, I think you're working like with Orange, and that's the one that comes to mind.
Yeah, right now.
Right away. So when they're distributing monthly to schools, either in the digital fund distribution or in the stadium fund option, do you know if they're delivering it based on FTE or how they're distributing it? I mean, I wouldn't imagine that they're just taking it and dividing it by the number of schools, since.
Yeah. Actually, the one I'm thinking of specifically, Orange, I believe is just, they just cut it by the school. So 100 schools, they cut it 100 ways even. I don't think they.
Right, and I think if we're saying that money goes to the school, I think one of the things we need to discuss as a board is what the school, who makes the decision at the school-based level as to what they do with that money. Does it go straight to the principal and the principal decides? Are they given parameters and guardrails of where to stay inside of? Does it, in the stadium case, does it go to the sports program, or does it go to overall anything that's happening at this? I think that's something that we need to kind of figure out what to do. And I think in my personal view is that especially with the stadium fund, option number 1 as opposed to option number 2 looks better, because if you're not the host school, if you're way down on the list and you're not going to be a host school for a while, you would be getting nothing. Whereas I think that everybody should be able to get at least a part. So I don't know how the rest of you feel.
Yeah, and can I add something? That's great points. I've seen different ways, like I said, and we step back from that point, but I have seen it, and I can offer some insights here. Is a lot of times, like you said, it seems that districts can get more involvement when there's a portion going back, and then who does make that? What do they do with it? I've seen it used for things where I know that there's been funding problems for non-discretionary funding for like things they can't use it for, like lunch for back-to-school trainings and things like that for their staff, or I've seen it used from stadiums for wheelchairs for special for their special Olympics teams for the school district. I've seen it used to returf fields. So it just depends. It's kind of all over the place with that based on need and your direction.
Anyone else have any questions?
Is there more of a presentation, or is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask a question at the end.
Okay. Yeah, this is the one last part. I just kind of want to go a little deeper from when we were talking earlier, because it's very important to me, and I'm sure it's very important to you as well, is going out into the community. What are the brands that we're reaching out to? Again, it should make sense for both. So the community brands that we see that work out, like I mentioned, doctors, dentists are a big one. Law firms do very well. We've seen personal finance, anything tax preparation, and financial advisors, credit unions do very well with that. So the things that we've done up to this point, just deliverables are the asset creation that we did in December and January. In January, creating the media kit, putting the ad system in place for digital has been January, February, and working to get the clearances on our end that we need, and then just putting the email together. And then we're waiting now to go further direction with this, and the next steps would be the fund distribution approval, the social media posts, getting an agreement, a standardized agreement that we use for the advertisers. We have a stock one I'm happy to share out and get looked at and here. And then we do our work with the paid promotion. So when we're on the phone and we're going out to local businesses, we're also supporting that with the paid social media promotion to get the awareness up for these programs. So.
I wanted to reiterate, just so in case you didn't get the direction from what we shared, is we are looking for approval or continued discussion on whether or not we can begin with Martin County High School as the first product that we put out to the community. That was the high school that had the highest valuation, so we're kind of seeking that based on what was in the presentation. We're also seeking if we can begin the process of securing digital ad placement on our school and district website. That would be the next step for us on the digital side, is making sure that we can position that to companies that would like to make a minimal investment and maybe putting an ad on a sidebar in those locations. And we're also asking the board to kind of begin thinking about, if not today, but begin thinking about, and we can bring it back, how we would update policy that's existing related to naming rights and community and special interest groups to declare how we would allocate the funding generated from these proposals. So that's kind of where we're at today with the considerations that we would like to have the board make.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for Brian. So what kind of a budget are we looking for all this? Is this going to be similar to what happened in Palm Beach, where it's about $150,000 per school naming right? And what percentage does your company get of that? Is it the same split as they got with the 65-35, or is it something different? According to the Palm Beach Post, didn't you negotiate a deal down there with those schools?
Yeah, that was, yep, that was hard. Yeah, that was, I think it was pre-COVID, and then that never launched because the school board never approved so no school ever sold. I don't know if their numbers were accurate. I don't recall the article, sorry.
Okay.
Or our contract.
But do you have some kind of a budget of what you think that this could generate, estimate?
Yeah, we've put a budget together. I can resend.
Yeah, I can pull up, it was part of the contract that was approved in November, and that also contained the allocation that goes for the services on a continual basis. I mean, I can pull that up, but it was included, the valuations as part of the contract.
Okay, thank you.
If I'm not mistaken, this is a stadium naming rights that we're going for here at Martin County High School? Yes, I just wanted to reiterate, it was the stadium that we're looking at.
Yes, I'm pulling that slide back up so that you all can see exactly what the first this is kind of like the first sheet that would go out on the physical property side for prospective businesses that would want to do that, and the other schools would phase in. But Brian, do you want to explain why you do a phased approach?
Normally, the reason we
Could
will
you come
go-
up
Oh,
to-
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Normally, the reason we'll do a phased approach is, one is it allows us to focus in, and the community partners to focus in on a specific property at a school. So, you know, whether it's the stadium at Martin County High School, or the gym at Jensen Beach, or theater at South Fork, we like to put those out one by one because it allows for that focus. It doesn't inundate the market. It doesn't create like a sense of cloudiness over the programs. It should be very specific for these programs. They do much better before. And I know that was from the Palm Beach. They put everything out there, and it never ended up going anywhere, but they hired us for the evaluations, but everything went out in the market at once. This creates a lot of clutter. So my recommendation is to do one at a time, find that partner, let them have the media that comes with it. I mean, it's a ton of awareness and brand alignment that is allowed from that partnership. And then you move on to the next one. And then as you go, then you start to stack the revenues. And from the first revenue projections that you were looking for, we have that in there where, you know, the anticipation on the timeline, you know, 6 months, you know, what will be sold the first year, estimated, and lay that up over a 5-year, or I think a 3-year period for this.
Would only one company be the stadium named person?
Yeah.
So one attorney or
That's right.
one physician?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Great question.
From that, I'm curious, in your experience, once people see that so-and-so has the naming right for the Martin County High School Stadium, does it generate interest in them wanting, in someone else wanting to do it at another school?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I don't know if that's a behavioral psychology theory or what, but from that, it does seem to create an ancillary, secondary options for companies wanting to reach out, right? It almost says, hey, we're open for partners, like, come here. And from that, a lot of times we actually even see the partner that does sign on to the stadium start to see that partnership build with the district, and it ends up growing out. In Orange County, we actually had an orthodontist. He at first was skeptical because he was like, man, that's a huge chunk of my budget to come out here and put into one school. He ended up coming back 3 years into the agreement and said he was doing so well with the first off, the gratitude he gets from his patients that come in, and then the new patients that come to his business. He actually bought a second one. He had a baseball field and a football field at another school because he said he was doing so well with it. So I don't know if that's a testament universally, but it's good to see on our end. And that's the other thing that's really important for us in our evaluations and for the school district is, you know, to find these correct partnerships, have these partnerships make sense where, you know, sometimes it comes up like, oh, why can't we get $1 million? Maybe, but from a marketing and advertising standpoint, you have to be able to justify that. You have to be able to walk into a marketing department or an ad agency and say, hey, look, here's where we got these numbers from. Here's why it's worth this to you, and take part of your marketing budget and move it in. You know, the thing that it does with the loyalty and where your money's going to the school district should be a benefit. It should be the icing, right? Like but from that, we want to be able to sell that where at the end of it, we see a lot of a very high renewal rate once someone comes on. We're really proud of that.
And once you get potential people that would be interested in that, who makes the final decision on which one you go with in a situation where there might be multiple people?
So one of the things we've talked about, we've not done to this point, but be interested in if putting it out in a way, an auction style delivery, where we promote it to the community and the people and say, hey, look, you know, between now and May 1st, you can put a bid in, and then from there, whatever the highest bid is, right? Once someone puts in, then you add another 5%. Say if someone wants to come in and you allow that to go that route. Otherwise, normally we're presenting to partners and talking simultaneously with several. And the first one that comes in with a contract and wants to sign, it comes to you for approval.
Okay, so ultimately the board would have approval? Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I guess my question is, I know you want to get started, but how are we vetting the companies and what's that process look like? We don't have a policy, so I
So-
would be concerned that we don't have the policy in place before we start.
At base level, we would be aligning the vetting of the companies with our policies on what is appropriate use for students. That would be the same type of policies that we use when accepting flyers or promotional materials or things of that nature that people want to put in schools. Naturally, we would not be accepting any bids or requests to do business with us from companies that whatever their product or service is not appropriate for minors. I do think that, you know, when the board originally gave direction and said that you all wanted us to look at local companies, I think our community is positioned uniquely where I think that is really going to work for us. I think, you know, going out in the street and when we see the type of businesses that put their banners on our school property already, if you drive up and down any of the gates that are facing roadways, you see banner after banner of local businesses that are, you know, appropriate for the market supporting our schools. I don't think we're gonna have any problems having to like reach out to huge corporations like some districts might have to do in larger areas where that's just where the mom and pop shops are gonna be priced out of the market. But I would say that we would be using the same type of vetting that we do with those businesses and making sure that they are appropriate for students in alignment with those policies that we have in place for advertising.
And how will this impact the programs that are already happening in our schools? Like when it's volleyball season and they're selling banners for the gymnasium or lacrosse or football, and those funds are raised pretty much by the parents whose children are in that program. How is that going to impact them?
That is an excellent question that we've already started to receive because those are a huge moneymaker for booster clubs, PTAs, and whatnot. By starting this way, our aim is to not touch any of those, you know, smaller types of enterprise that schools have entered into. We want to be really cognizant of that because we know that various different groups have been involved for years in making money that way. We really are starting out, if approved, to move forward with the stadium at Martin County High, which there is another existing partnership there that's been in place with that school where they have major advertising on the scoreboard. So that school already has a partnership in place for part of their stadium that would have to be honored and taken into consideration. But with that said, our goal is to make sure that we're looking at like physical structures, you know, things that aren't so much like transient banners that would be changed when the sports season changes over, or, you know, maybe the PTA does different banners in the fall than they do in the spring. We really don't want to touch with anything to do with that. We're going to be looking at like major types of, you know, naming of a structure, naming of, you know, to the point of the company that's on the scoreboard at Martin County High School right now that has a contract for that. That's what we would be looking to renew when that comes time at the current valuations and make sure that we have current numbers when we go out to those businesses.
Thank you.
That's what we see often as well, is you know, we try to identify that early on as the price point, platform, right? Like differentiator between web advertising and a banner out at an event. The audience is a little different there, and then really the decision makers are often different. If somebody's local, and with us, we're working a lot of times with business owners, local business owners on the local end. A lot of times, especially with national brands, we're leading ourselves to their ad agencies and their marketing departments. Sometimes it's different, and sometimes it comes out of different pockets as well. But we don't see a lot of attrition from that. We actually see, like I was saying at the beginning, we try to use ourselves as well as a good partner and send the ones that don't make a good fit for the stadium naming rights or the digital to other options, and a lot of that's school-based. So we do that as well. If someone calls and says, hey, I just had today, I just walked into a place and had a meeting with someone, and they said, hey, we really want to put banners up on the schools. I said, absolutely, I'll give you the information, make sure that you're out to that. So we want to help lead that back, even if it's not in our purview. We don't want them just to walk away and go back to the radio. Not that there's anything wrong with it.
But to Brian's point, I personally see this as being another way that we can kind of like understand more about how different, even the banner sales that we wouldn't be partaking in, how they're happening, how they're occurring organically. Is there a reason why someone's only working with one school? Like, we really want to get more in touch with our business partners at the district level and understand more about the decisions they're making. And if we can offer guidance to booster clubs or PTA groups and maybe help them with valuations and things of that nature, we're happy to do it, just for the awareness and understanding more of how that's connecting, because that is one of our strategic plan goals, is kind of building out the adult learners and the people in our community, how they interact with our schools, what their experiences is, what they need to learn more about. And I kind of see that as being a game changer for us to have that awareness that we haven't had as a district before about how the business partnerships are working across each campus.
So I do have, Martin County High School brings up an interesting point that I don't know what the really answer is. So I know that, I think it's one of their scoreboards or something that has signage up there for, I think it's an attorney, actually.
I think Southport Scoreboard has it too,
So-
not an attorney, but
Yeah.
has
So I don't know,
companies.
I mean, I've never seen a contract for any of those. Mrs. Powers, do you remember ever seeing a contract for, so I don't know.
I
who's-
liken it to banners like anything else, like
Well, I mean, but I look at
sponsorships, like,
I look at a banner as something that isn't a more permanent kind of thing, you know, I mean, so I don't know, when somebody decides, well, I'm gonna go do your scoreboard, is there any standard to which, so I guess I'm asking a Mark Seacrest question, is there any standard that we say it's gotta be fixed this way? Is there a contract that's signed? Is there anything, or are they just,
I don't know of anything that we currently have in place.
so, and I think that's something that we probably need to look at, because I don't think, you know, that if Brian puts a sign up on a scoreboard, his expertise at putting one up might be a little bit different than my expertise with my hammer and
Well,
nails.
yeah,
as to-
and do we have any kind of board policy on any of this, basically? That's my concern, is that I see the opportunity, I think it's great. I'm a little hesitant because this is the Wild West, really. Like, we have controversial businesses in this community, and I don't want to make it like a joke if one of them is the naming right of the stadium without any board policy. So that's my hesitation.
I agree with you. I think doing a lot of this before we have a policy that vets companies, that vets figures out, like, is it going to be something controversial, which we don't want to. I'm sure they would like the attention, but we
Yeah.
don't. That's
Right.
not why,
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? Bad press is good press, or whatever that saying is. Any press is good press, or,
And I
Yeah.
think we have the start of a policy that has a lot of that in it. Is that correct, Mr. Shazo?
You do. You have various policies that touch on different pieces. So you have your advertising and relations with commercial activities. You recently updated your naming rights, but to Dr. Moriarty and Mrs. Powers' point, there's probably more language that, at the board's desire, we could bring back a recommendation for language that would kind of detail more of what businesses would be accepted, aside from just businesses that would be appropriate for minors. That's what's been in place for many years, but we could absolutely bring back different parameters under the advertising and commercial activities policy. We could also, and would be happy to develop some administrative procedures which will be needed going forward for if we were to start with this, how it would look if someone was going to alter the scoreboard to do their signage. Those would be more facilities procedures, but that would be carrying out your policy, and we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, and I think we need to do that, and I also think we need to see, so if you put a sign up at a scoreboard, I don't know what was promised. I don't know whether when I put it up, it's like, I'm allowed, you know, I gave you $1,000 and I get to have it for 10 years, or whether it's, I don't know what and I don't know if it breaks, who's supposed to fix it, I don't know any of those things, so probably, I guess that's you, right, Mark? I guess you would, or Brian, I
Well,
guess.
we would help oversee it.
Yeah, but I whatever's in place now, I mean, I think that we need to kind of know what those schools are doing now, so that,
Well, I don't think there's, honestly, that there's anything in place. I can tell you as a parent involved in athletics, all of my kids participated in different sports throughout the years, and the parents were hanging banners. There was no like design, yes, maybe the size of the banner, but you pretty much handed in your artwork and there's a group of volunteers and they're hanging banners, they're getting someone to donate things, and to your point about, well, why is one company supporting? It's really about the relationships that that company either has to the school or that a parent has to that company, that is out recruiting and getting those banners for
Yeah,
the
and I
sport.
kind
And
of-
then they come down and they go back up and they get some of them, sometimes they get saved, sometimes they don't. There's,
and I can imagine a banner that, and I think it's two separate things. I think there's the more permanent, the hammer and nail thing, and then there's the tied-on banners. But I mean, it scares me to think that you would have a banner that says, if you're hurt or injured in an accident, here's my phone number. And it's on a banner that's like staring at you, and somebody falls down, and it's like, look, there's who I'm gonna, I just think it's a
well,
little.
that's like, that's no different than what professional supports do. Like I think it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Stadium is like
If you're hurt or
1-800
injured.
call Gary or whatever it is for
We come to you in our mobile
yeah.
van.
And that's essentially, it is that kind of advertising. And I mean, there's nothing, they're not saying anything vulgar or, it is their business model.
Superintendent Maine.
I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to clean all of this up and come back to the board with some recommended language and give us the ability to put some procedural things in place, because you asked that question and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I don't know, the schools are probably just, that's been around for a while. So we need to put a process in place, and staff is ready to do that. We can certainly bring that forward for you all to review. And I would think that there would want to be a standard of what it looked like, a template that we would want all of our schools to follow. So there's consistency throughout the district on all of our signs, or whomever is requesting to put their name on that sign. It needs to fit certain parameters and have certain requirements, but we could bring that back.
So would you bring back a naming rights policy with the language that would cover all of the concerns stated here today?
Absolutely. We can definitely put together some recommended language that would go deeper into what kind of advertisements or even businesses as a whole would, be recommended to be considered by the board as prospective agreements that we would enter into. I will say, to Superintendent Maine's point, we would obviously need to start developing some procedures for what we have in place, even probably with banners and things, so that can be cleaned up, even with our groups that are doing the banners. But from the naming rights perspective, we would have this, I don't know if you can see it on your computer screen, but what's on the screen in the presentation would be kind of what we would recommend for how that would look on, it doesn't have the dimensions or anything, that would have to be negotiated, but how that would look as part of the package. If you were buying at $7,500 a week the rights to Martin County High School Stadium, that's what you would get. And then we'd have the administrative procedures developed with facilities to make sure that if something broke, that we were working with the business to correct the deficiencies in their display. Once the contract was up, Brian would be working with them to see about renewal, see if anything needs to be cleaned up, even if it needs to be pressure washed, updated, those kind of things. Just making sure that everything is on the up and up, not only from the contract side, but from the display that we're putting forward to the community side of the actual advertisements.
So do you need something from us today, or should we wait for the procedure the policy to come forward?
I do not. We will bring back the policies with, the existing policies with a little bit more clarification that we're recommending that the board can consider and discuss. And then also next time, now that you've seen some of the recommended options for distributing, funding that's generated through this, both on the digital advertising side and the physical property side, maybe some more discussion from the board and coming to consensus on what we're thinking about distributing the funds, because that will have to go into our policy as well to be memorialized.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Madam Chair, can I just get would you like to see this policy come forward in the next round, or okay, we just clarification. so-
Yes,
okay.
I shouldn't have said that on my own, but I got the impression that we had consensus that we want something in place.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Calderon, we will now have an update on employee benefit insurance RFP for fully insured medical and pharmacy.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Maine, Don Calderon, Director of Risk Management and Employee Benefits for the Martin County School District. And alongside me is a familiar face, Dustin Keene, Senior Benefits Consultant with the Guerin Group. As you may recall, when we returned from winter break in January of this year, we received the renewal offer from Florida Blue, the district's current medical insurance carrier, for the 25-26 plan year, and that came in at a 32% premium increase. At that board workshop, the board directed staff to work alongside the Guerin Group for the Guerin Group to release an RFP for the fully insured medical and pharmacy benefit package for the school district. So we were happy to be here today to present the initial offers and respondents to that RFP, and I'm going to hand it off to Dustin Keene.
All right, good afternoon. Here to walk you through just a quick update on the RFP process, and we'll kind of get into next steps in a bit. But to start, you have 3 great carriers that came to the table to answer the RFP. Cigna, your incumbent Florida Blue, as well as United Healthcare, which are all great carriers in the industry. So when we look at the initial offers here, great news is that it's coming down from that 30% not to exceed down to Florida Blue is at a 15.9%. On page 3, you can see their proposal. They have an even increase per plan, so HMO is 15.9, PPO 15.9, high deductible 15.9. We'll skip down to Cigna. You'll see that there are some red and blues in the plan design. Reds are decrements, blues are enhancements. For the most part, we consider this a plan match. Some of the differences just have to do with how Florida Blue sets up their preferred network and their cost share, but mostly everything is a plan match. The HMO they're proposing is at a 16.3% increase, so a little bit higher on the HMO than Florida Blue. However, on the PPO, a little bit lower at a 14.1%, and on the high deductible at a 0%. So overall, 13.1% increase proposed by Cigna. And option number 3, United Healthcare, who proposed their neighborhood health or NHP networks, which we'll get into. A little bit more reds and blues. Biggest disruption here on the plan design is the mental health. Currently, it's no charge for HMO and the PPO for inpatient, outpatient. They're proposing calendar year deductible and cost share. Other than that, it's basically a plan match. You'll see from a rating structure, their HMO's at a 16% increase. PPO's at a 25.6% decrease. And the high deductible health plan is at about a 0.4% decrease, or basically a flat. So net, altogether, their premium increase is a 9.8% increase. Now getting into kind of the other caveats or the other funds with these proposals. We kind of broke it down into a few categories. On-site rep-wise, as you know, Donna Wilson, Florida Blue offers her as an on-site service to your members. All carriers proposed offering that position. Cigna and United Healthcare also offered a full-time on-site wellness coordinator as well. Rate cap-wise, we always ask for this. This is to protect the district in year 2, to make sure that, you know, carriers not coming in and buying the business and then increasing the rates dramatically in year 2. So you'll see that Florida Blue is capping their rates in year 2 at 11.9%. Cigna's rate cap is based on loss ratio at the time. It's a graded scale. It can be anywhere from 0% all the way up to 17.9%. However, after 105% loss ratio, there is no more rate cap. United Healthcare is at a 13% for year 2. As far as funds go, United Healthcare is offering a $100,000 discretionary fund, and that means the district can use it at your discretion, however you want to use those funds. Implementation and technology credit, Florida Blue is offering a one-time $50,000 credit. Cigna is offering a $50,000 per year fund, and United Healthcare is offering a $100,000 one-time credit for implementation and a $50,000 per year fund for tech. Wellness-wise, Florida Blue is offering $150,000 a year, which they currently offer. Cigna is offering $200,000, and United Healthcare is offering $150,000. They all offer wellness programs, and they all are great. They all have different names and different programs, but they all are very great programs. Participating-wise, what that means is you're currently on 100% pro share with Florida Blue. What that means is if your claims run better than expected, the district can get 100% of that surplus back to the district. It's been about 6 years since you've gotten that because your claims have been quite high, but you have had that in the past. Florida Blue's keeping that 100% pro share agreement. Cigna is offering a 50% share. United Healthcare is offering 100% share. So the next part that we vet out when we do these RFPs is we look at all of the providers and the facilities that your members have used in the past 12 months. We send the carriers that listing of all of those providers and carriers. In this case, you've had 4,079 providers used in the past 12 months. And then we ask the carriers to say, are these providers in network or out of network, so we can get a disruption if you were to change carriers. So Florida Blue has 2 networks, the PPO, which also is your high deductible, it's the same network, and they have the HMO network. Their in-network provider rate for the PPO is 91%, the HMO is 81%. Cigna OAP network or Open Access Plus network, it's the same for all 3 plans, HMO, PPO, high deductible, has a 97% in-network match. And United Healthcare with their NHP network has a 70% match. A little bit more on United Healthcare. They have 2 networks they typically lead with. One's their Choice Plus network, which is their national network, or NHP, which is a little bit of a narrower network. It started years ago in Broward and Dade County, and it's worked its way up through Florida. So out of state-wise, there is no coverage. So there are about 17 retirees out of the state that would lose coverage under their proposal. They have also offered 3 additional Choice Plus plans if the district wished to consider, which would mean you'd offer 6 plans. But for purposes of this disruption, since this is what affects most of your members, we're including the NHP network. Next part that we want to look at is prescriptions. So we looked at plan, we looked at rates, we looked at network. Now we want to look at prescriptions. Based upon what your members are utilizing, we want to know if you switch carriers, would those prescriptions be a higher cost to your members, lower cost? Would they be excluded, included, et cetera? So you'll see positive, negative, neutral impact. Positive impact means your prescription's going from a higher cost tier to a lower cost. Negative impact means it's going from a lower cost to a higher cost, or the prescription is excluded completely. And neutral means it's covered, it's staying in the same tier, same cost share. So Florida Blue, you see NA because there's no disruption that's currently covered as it's covered. Cigna has a 3.9% positive, 3.1% negative, about a 93% neutral. And United Healthcare has a 4% positive, 22.5% negative impact, and a 73.5% neutral. So this is based on 32,000 prescriptions that your members have used over the past 12 months. Side notes, you do have condition RX, which is a zero-cost formulary that's separate. It's not included in this. You have about 1,500 members that utilize that program with Florida Blue currently. So one of our recommendations in the best and final round is ask each carrier to propose what their zero-cost formula looks like, so we can then come back and give you kind of a comparison of how that looks as well. Now, from a scoring criteria, and with the help of your procurement department, Cigna is ranking number 1 with 98.86 points, Florida Blue second at 96.46 points, and United Healthcare at 92.82 in third. If you want to see the scoring methodology, that is on the next page, and how we define everything included in that. And for next steps, we are really looking for your direction on which carriers to be shortlisted and included in the best and final negotiation round. You can do all 3, 2, etc. The insurance committee did recommend yesterday to include all carriers in the best and final round. And they also, from a request standpoint, wanted to concentrate on page 6, which are, you know, the rates, as well as kind of the other caveats with the rate cap and wellness funds, et cetera, asking them to sweeten the pot as much as they can. So with that, I will turn it over to you for questions.
I have a question. This on-site wellness coordinator, could you just talk a little bit more about what they would be doing?
Yeah, so, you know, your wellness program, which, you know, currently Garing Group also has 2 on-site reps, and we help with that with Donna Wilson as well, and your staff. So this wellness coordinator would be in addition to those resources and would help with wellness fairs, developing your wellness program if they wanted to offer, you know, different incentives and metrics. And it really is just an open umbrella on how you wanted to use that.
Does the district currently do anything like that with wellness, or what do superintendent maybe, or Don, or?
Yeah, so Dr. Moriarty, like Dustin stated, we do have a very robust and healthy, no pun intended, wellness program in place through a collaboration between our on-site rep from Florida Blue, Donna Wilson, our 2 on-site benefits specialists from the Garing Group, as well as staff. So we currently have been managing our wellness program through that arrangement.
Okay. So do you feel like that's a big advantage to have someone dedicated to that, or?
Not really.
Not
no.
really. Okay.
Not really. Nope.
Thank you.
Lee, do you have anything?
Yeah, so my first question is, congratulations. Well, I guess we should be congratulating ourselves. I guess our loss ratio went down to 88%. And then when they're working on their best and final, we're going to be able to have February, I guess, so that if it either stays the same or trends, we'll probably be able to knock some piece of that down, correct?
Right.
Depending on what that looks like.
Right. The insurance committee met yesterday afternoon into the early evening, and we did get some positive news. Our January 2025 claims came in better than expected. We had a loss ratio of 88%, which dropped off, I believe, 100% or 109% from January 2024. So around March 18th, the Garing Group will be releasing the February 2025 claims to the best and final carriers, and hopefully you'll be in a better position for negotiations. Yes.
So I have a couple questions. So I see that with Florida Blue, it's an across the board 15.9 for year 1, and then with let's just look at Cigna. Cigna's a 13.1, and I'm assuming that's a weighted average depending on the number of participants per plan, correct? Right? Okay. And so when we're doing that, when you're looking at this increase, you're looking at a 16.3 increase for the first plan and the, correct? I mean, I'm looking at 3 and I'm looking at what that looks like, which is a deviation from what Florida Blue was always willing to do, where they wanted to spread it out all over. So my question is, when they're saying that if our loss ratio, if it hits over 105%, are they saying 105% per plan, or are they saying 105% for the weighted average?
Weighted average. Total amongst all 3 plans. So
Okay.
currently, you're at a 100% loss ratio.
Right, so then I think it's important to note what the weighted average loss ratio has been historically for those, for the overall piece, to see how many times we've gone above the 105. Do you see what I'm asking you?
Yeah, and I'll say you're trending up over the years. You used to be in the 70s, and that's
Right.
because of these competitive RFP processes. Your premium comes back down, loss ratio goes up, but we can certainly give you that. I don't think you've been at 105% for a rolling 12-month period very long in
Right, and I think that when we're looking at where we are around bid time, it improves. So remember, after the holidays, when we get January's numbers, it typically improves. So my next question is, when they're saying 105% as a loss ratio, when is their cutoff on that? So when we hit year 2, are they going to cut us off in December? Are they cutting us off in January? I mean, when is their program going to be computing that loss ratio? So, yeah, so I'm looking at, when Cigna is saying that there is no cap if it's 105%, and the 105% is weighted, when are they planning on computing their 105?
Yeah, so they would need claims through January. So next February, we would have the final calculation to see where that rate cap would fall.
So it would be through January, not through February. It would be through January.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that no rate cap if loss ratio is over 105%, as of the February 26 numbers, which would include the January 26 loss ratio, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And then I'm looking, so whether I look at United Healthcare or whether I look at any of these other ones that's not Florida Blue, then what that's saying is, those are saying that they're willing to let the premium increase or decrease be siloed to the particular plan. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
So what they mean by 11.9%, for example, on Florida Blue, that is weighted average amongst all 3 plans.
No, you're missing what I'm asking you. So if I look on page 22, and I look at option 1 for Florida Blue, and it's 15.9, which is the weighted average, but it's 15.9 across the board. So when I look at what the increase, decrease in premium is, it's 15.9 for each of the 3 of them. When I look at page 23, and I'm looking at Cigna, and I'm seeing that the weighted average is 13.1%, but I'm seeing that the first plan, the Open Access Plus OAPIN, which I'm assuming is the HMO, correct?
Correct.
That would be increasing at 16.3%. The next one would be 14.1, and the third one would have no increase. So across the board, the average is going to be 13.1, but they're willing to assign those increase or decrease to that number. So when I'm looking at page 24, and I'm looking in particular that I've got an average of 9.8, and I'm assuming that United Healthcare is doing the same thing. I've got a weighted average of 9.8, but the first plan, which is the HMO, is the 16.1% increase, correct? The next plan, which is a PPO, correct, has a decrease of 15.6%. 25.6%. 25.6% for that to go down, and a decrease also in the high deductible, correct?
Correct.
then that brings me to my next question. When I'm looking at your scoring methodology and you're looking at disruption, and you're, obviously, Florida Blue isn't disrupting their own thing because they are what they already are, and that's who we're comparing them to. My question when I'm looking at the Cigna and the United Healthcare disruption is, I know that we've had a problem in the past, say with certain specialties, so say dermatology.
Yeah.
And so then my question goes to, as you're looking at an overall disruption, I'm a little bit interested in, is the disruption in a certain field? Like, is the disruption across the board? You know, so remember we had the dermatology problem, needed to add more providers for dermatology, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm looking at, let's say, United Healthcare with their disruption number, but is their disruption number all centered in one specialty? Meaning that it's going to be a nightmare for anybody who was in that. So if you can drill down on that maybe next time, I think that would be
Sure.
somewhat helpful to kind of know for our highest use specialty items, what that actually looks like.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense there?
Yeah, and when we're talking, oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are you done, Lee?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just have to get this off my chest because it's really disheartening to trust the process when we get such a high renewal rate from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then we go out to bid and it cuts in half. So why? How is it? Why didn't we get that to start with? So that's just it just makes me not trust the process. I would like to see. I don't like the 15.9% on our high deductible plan because that is something we've always tried to do, is offer a zero cost option to our employees. And this doesn't allow us to do that because of our cap is 6,500. So for employee only, I mean. And so I'm not, we need an option that we can offer our employees that is a zero cost to them. That's just, and I think it's the high deductible plan. I think probably if you rated that plan, the high deductible plan, more healthy people tend to go into that plan because there is more out-of-pocket expenses. So I don't know what the loss ratio is by plan, but I'd like to kind of see what that looks like. And I think it's really important for us to be able to offer that to our employees. It's just makes me like, I just can't even, employees cannot afford to insure their families, which is terrible. Talk about it all the time. Our employees that have a spouse and a child, or maybe they're not even covering their spouse, the employee and the family, and I don't know how they afford this. They would be working, some employees get paid so little that they would strictly be working for insurance. And they could pretty much put their whole paycheck towards it. It's just
if you look
disheartening.
If you look on page 10, it's got the loss ratios by plan for the last.
Which one?
Mrs.
Page
Roberts,
10.
I believe you're referring to the insurance committee booklet that you may have.
Didn't everyone get this?
That was, we did run the copies upstairs. That is the hard copy from the insurance committee meeting that has additional information in there based on current loss ratio. Our presentation to the board that is uploaded into board docs is strictly based on the RFP.
This is only 12 pages.
We can,
But we,
What page are you looking at,
page
Lee?
10, if you look
Okay.
at page 10, it's got the rolling, well, it's got claims experience through June of 2024, and it's by plan. The top one being the HMO, but the middle one being the high deductible, with a 23-24 number of 65%. And I think that's something that, you know, I understand your scoring methodology and everything, but I really think that as they look at their best and final and they look at that, they need to understand that one of our priorities is a no-cost option. You know, and no cost, meaning that the 6,500 that the board is putting in for the employee pays for that plan, right? But do you see what I'm looking at, Marcia?
And that was requested in the or actually in the original RFP was the board's interest to keep that plan at a 0%. So we will reiterate that in the best and final request.
So which part of that did Florida Blue not understand then?
I can't answer them, but we will go back and ask. And it, also to answer your question on the loss ratio, the HMO is at 101% loss ratio for this plan year, 47% for the high deductible, and 165% for the PPO. Correct.
Have we looked at any, I mean, obviously the PPO is just, the loss ratio is, this is driving a lot of the increase, especially when you apply it across the board at 100 and, well, this one says 178%, but what is it now with February, I guess? Do you have, well, this is only through June of '24, so.
Yeah, if you go to page 8, it gives you a more update on this current plan year.
Okay, okay.
So you're at 165% loss ratio plan year to date on the PPO. And most of that is because, you know, most of your high cost claimants, high utilizers are in that plan. You know, there was discussion in the past on getting rid of the PPO, but what that would do is those high cost claimants would go in the HMO or the high deductible and adversely affect those plans and increase the rates. So that's why we grandfathered them so that it wouldn't impact all of your plans because most of your enrollment is in that HMO plan.
Right. But I'm talking, what about any plan design changes for the PPO, not the high deductible, but the one obviously that would more out of pocket, obviously for the employees that choose that plan, but they're also getting, I mean, we're paying a lot in claims for, what is it, a fraction of the employees that are participating in it. And it's driving these increases across the board.
Yeah, and we have marked up that PPO so much over time.
I know.
It's almost a high deductible health plan at this point. So really the most impact you'll get on rates is carving up the HMO. That's most of where your enrollment sits. And that's kind of, we haven't touched that plan in quite a bit. So we issued this requesting proposals to match your plan design because it's very difficult to look at plan alts and carrier changes at the same time. So where we are right now at the 15%, and we think we can get them lower actually through the best and final, is based upon your current plan design.
You done, Ms. Powers? Yes. Okay. Dr. Moriarty?
Yeah, I share Mrs. Powers' frustration, I'll be honest with you. Because, I mean, I had a teacher come into my office a few weeks ago and literally broke down crying that she's basically paying to get insurance for her family and why is she even doing it. And now we're going to come back to them and say, hey, guess what? The best we got is a 15% increase. So, you know, it's frustrating. I know this isn't the last round. I know we have the best and final, and hopefully a miracle happens in there. But I just want to state that I still think this district should look into taking steps to becoming a self-insured plan like the county and like so many other large organizations in this area. But in the short term, I will ask one final question. In terms of your evaluation criteria, number 4, about the proposer's ability to compete in these networks, about why you had Cigna at 15 and Florida Blue at 13.47.
Yeah, so that criteria is a blended average of the network disruption and the pharmacy disruption. So Cigna actually had a stronger network as it came back. They had a 97% in-network match on the network, whereas Florida Blue had a 91% or an 81%, depending on the PPO or HMO network. On the pharmacy side, Florida Blue obviously had a higher percentage than Cigna, but based upon when we weighted those two together, Cigna had the lowest disruption because of that higher network reach. So they got max points for that criteria.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments?
I know you talked to us over the years, you've repeatedly told us that when we adjust the PPO, that we're going to have plan migration and it's going to negatively affect and it's going to bleed over to the other plans. But the data that you're presenting us doesn't necessarily support that. It's still showing that 6.7% of the participants who are in the PPO are the ones that are driving the loss ratio and making that loss ratio. And I don't care whether I look at the whole year for the last year, last year's data, or if I look at year to date, but I'm not seeing, it's right around 100% for the HMO, but it's not, I think that when you gave us your migration thoughts several years ago, it was like, yeah, you got 150, 160% here, but it's going to make those go way up over 100%, and we're not seeing that. So, I think it's just as an aside.
Sure.
I think that's a...
Yeah, and, our recommendation always was to not get rid of the PPO because that would certainly migrate those high-cost claimants. Our recommendation is to slowly increase the benefits over time so that you get people migrating, but it's not drastic year one or year two. What we're seeing is still high utilizers are staying in that plan, and I think that's just because of the nature of the PPO. Even though the benefits are becoming higher cost share, they want the expanded reach of network, and they're staying there. So that's mostly why we're still seeing a high loss rate.
Thank you.
And just, I know the numbers are in front of you. We're down to just 127 employees in the PPO, which is substantially lower than it has been in the past. And our high deductible health plan, like Mrs. Powers has pointed out, is very attractive at the zero premium employee only cost. And we have seen quite a bit of enrollment over the last 3-4 years in there. So like Dustin stated, we're kind of at a point where the people that are in the PPO are willing to pay the higher cost for their premium and the higher cost for when they utilize it. We feel like we've done a strong job of educating employees as to the benefits of the high deductible and the HMO.
Right, but it's when they have 176% loss ratio, they're not paying the premium. The premium doesn't match the claims at almost double what they're paying. So that means everybody else is picking up the slack that's paying premiums in the district. So those 120 people or whatever it is, they're getting a bargain because the premium doesn't reflect the cost that they're causing and incurring for the district.
You're 100% correct. And I feel like we've had this conversation here with our current carrier and the fact that they spread across an even increase rather than rating the plans individually, where you saw that, Cigna did that, United Health did it, but they have a 25% decrease on the PPO. I don't know how they came up with that. I'm not a math major, but it's always been the direction and the wishes of the board to have the current carrier properly and individually rate those increases so it can be proportionate to the loss ratio.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add on that. Your HMO is at 101% loss ratio year to date. That's very high as well. That plan is actually contributing more towards your overall increase than the PPO. So even though your PPO is a higher loss ratio, because you have 70% of your enrollment in the HMO and targeted loss ratio is 80%, you're 20% over that. So that's where actually most of the weight is being driven, which is why most of your carriers are rating that plan higher.
What if we only had the high deductible? PPO as opposed to the other PPO as well? I mean, I know it will drive the cost higher for the high deductible PPO, but I mean, I know surrounding counties do that. Like St. Lucie County only offers a high deductible plan. They don't offer anything that's not.
And are you referring to getting rid of the HMO as well?
No, not the HMO.
So when we did this exercise in previous years, getting rid of the PPO, it's actually increased the pricing of the other two. And it's because they're assuming that risk goes one or two places. So again, that's why we've always recommended grandfathering them, because your HMO wouldn't be adversely affected in
Dustin, what do you think the chances are of Florida Blue coming down further than 15.9?
Based upon other bids, and we do quite a bit of these, I would say very, very high.
Going down?
Yes.
Like 2%, 3%?
I'm not going to give
Any
you numbers,
percent?
but I would say.
Come on.
I would say they would most likely want to retain your business, and they know where your competitors are. So at least that, if not more, where their competitors.
So with Cigna being at 13.1, they might at least come down to there in the world of they know what the others are doing. Is that a fair assessment? I'm not asking you to commit, I'm saying they're seeing what the other two bidders are offering.
Right.
They're going to want to come down to at least what one of them has that's better to retain our business.
Correct. I
Okay.
would say that's a high probability. In addition to that, your January claims were very good, so that helps your case.
Okay.
And hopefully, fingers crossed, February comes in good as well. So I
Okay.
think 104% drops off of your rolling 12. So as long as it's under that, it should improve your circumstances.
Okay. I believe we need to tell you whether to go with 3 or 2. Is that correct? What is the consensus of the board?
To do the best and final?
Yeah, to do the BAFO.
I'm fine with them all submitting a best and
Okay.
final.
That's what the
Yeah.
insurance committee recommended, and are we on? Okay, so go with all 3.
And can I just ask one other question? I want to know kind of whoever we decide to go with, if we start, I know as Dr. Moriarty mentioned, we've talked about for a really long time, and we have a little fund set aside for, self-insurance, potentially going to that in the future. But what I'm curious about is, can we, whoever the carrier is, if we can manage some costs similar to like what our sheriff's office, they have an office specific to them. They're able to manage some of the costs with a specific facility, like to go in for checkups and certain pharmacy products. Like, what's the possibility of that? Like actually putting something in place that we've been talking about forever, probably more than 10 years. And we bring it up every year about this time because this is like really hard to pass along to our employees. What is the likelihood of being able to implement something? And I'm not talking about our own clinic. I'm talking about contracting with a doctor or a suite of doctors that, that way we could manage those costs a little bit better.
Yep, good question. So what you're referring to is an on-site health center, and we do the consulting for the county and the board and St. Lucie Sheriff and the constitutionals there as well, so we're well-versed in your area. We'll say 99% of our clients are self-insured first before they put a health center in order to get the return on investment. So we've been talking about self-insured, as you know, for 15 years plus. That would be the first step. After this bid, select a carrier. Potentially next year, look at self-insured again, implement self-insured if it looks good, and then from there, because you can build a reserve over what the Office of Insurance Regulation requires, which is 60 days of claims, that will then allow you to fund a clinic. And hopefully then after year one, that's when we start to see a 2-to-1 ROI if you get the utilization above 75%. So we can help you with that. We have a kind of 3-year plan in that regards, but it does start with being self-insured.
You guys been talking about that for 15 years?
Yes, well.
I thought I
at
just
least
came up
12.
with that.
At least
What are
12,
we waiting
I
on?
know.
Let's go.
And we have been setting aside, you know, the pro share dollars and the things that when we do get a pro share, which like Dustin said, it's been a while, but I don't know what else. We have to do something. We cannot have double-digit increases every year. It's just not sustainable. I don't know how we can't continue to we just can't do it. We just can't. I don't know what is our other option? And I don't know what our financial position is right at this moment to be able to offer that, or to move forward with that now. We've got to control these expenses in some way. Whether it's pharmacy or, you know, doctors.
Thank you.
I have one more thing. As our chair was talking about the 13.1 for Cigna, I'd also like to point out that the United Healthcare, if you average the 2 years, this year's 9.8 to the 13% cap for next year, that's like 11.4. So I think we're actually getting very close to a single-digit increase percentage as opposed to a double-digit. Just pointing that out. Thanks.
Just one last thing before we move on. I just want to let you know that the insurance committee will be meeting in 3 weeks on March 24th with the results of the best and final. We will be here the following day at the school board meeting on March 25th. Hopefully the board will make a decision on which carrier they would like to move forward with, but there's also 2 other pieces of information. I just want the board to be prepared, and if you need additional information from staff, we'd be more than happy to meet with you between now and then. But each year, whether we're out to bid or not, the school board does make a decision on funding 2 separate items for budget. The employee plus family prior to 7/1/20, they get an additional subsidy towards their medical insurance premium, as well as the health savings account contribution for those employees that are on the high deductible health plan. So those will be 2 other things as well. We would look for recommendations in 3 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Carter Morrison, Budget Workshop number 1.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, superintendent, members of the public, staff in attendance, and those watching us over the World Wide Web. Just want to welcome everyone to the Budget Workshop number 1, which is the first in a series of budget workshops designed to update the board and the public in our budget development process for the fiscal year 25-26. In front of you, you should have, just to double check, you should have a copy of this afternoon's presentation, along with several handouts ranging from alphabet at the top, attachment A, all the way through attachment D, and also what I'm going to refer to as a long spreadsheet that is a color-coded spreadsheet that shows the history of the district's unweighted FTE final numbers through the preliminary numbers in October of last year. So with that, on this afternoon's agenda, We will be looking at where we are in the budget cycle, discuss a little bit about the legislative session, the calendar. Of course, session started today. We'll talk a little bit about the history of the district's unweighted FTE, look at some trend data, K-12 public school 24-25 update, look at the estimated impact of the October FTE in comparison to our projections, as well as what we had for last year, and just run through some of the agenda items with respect to budgetary approaches, challenges, and finally close off with the executive order as issued by the governor. So in the in the fiscal 25-26 budget process, you can see the arrow that says we are here. Actually, we're a little bit ahead because we, today, I believe the team discussed with the superintendent our projected FTE for next year, which I believe is due to the state this Friday. In addition to that, we have met with the principals in the second or third week of February to dispense their allocations for next year. So we're within the FTE projection, budget meetings, and staffing allocations to schools area of our budget cycle. As I mentioned today, March 4 on the legislative calendar, session starts today. The session convened pursuant to Article 3, Section B of the state constitution. And at the bottom of the slide, I just wanted to kind of point out a little bit where the new Speaker of the House, Mr. Perez, hinted at budget cuts coming into the fiscal year. Expect some fiscal belt tightening in the Florida House. The House typically is the chamber that controls the purse strings, and the legislature. Senate is more on the policy side, although at the end of the session, both chambers will get together and negotiate what we call a final conference report between the two chambers. The next couple of slides will just give you a peek inside the Florida Department of Education's database that we use for our FTE projections for coming up for next fiscal year 25-26. A couple of graphs from that database. On the left-hand side shows Martin All, which includes your charter schools, your scholarships, and your traditional schools. So if one were to look at that, model, you would think that overall that the school district is increasing our FTE. However, when you look to the right, you'll notice that the traditional FTE for Martin County schools, we have a declining model, and the model there also forecasts a further decline in our 25-26 FTE. So at this point, I wanted to also point out that we did not receive a third calculation, which is the October count, until late yesterday afternoon. So you've heard before that the truth does have a date and time stamp on it. So some of these numbers I will refer to you when we go through the actual detail of the numbers, that they have not been certified by the DOE, but preliminarily what we have received back in terms of the data that we have sent. All other models that we looked at, not only Model 9, predict a further decline in the school district's traditional FTE. On the next slide, you'll see charter schools. Charter schools, again, are projected to increase to about 1,606. Currently, in our preliminary data as of October, they came in at around 1,540, 1,547. This accounts for addition of some students at Clark Advanced Learning Center. As you may recall, the board did increase the cap for Clark, as well as Indiantown High School. So that is accommodated within that 1,606. And then virtual remains pretty much flat, but we do have a slide to talk a little bit about it further on slide 25 about a new initiative that we will be utilizing to try to get some more FTE coming in. On slide 8, as I mentioned before, I just wanted to give you a historical timeline of when we typically receive our reports from the state for the October FTE count. In 2015-16, which is typically what we're used to, we would receive the report right after we leave for the winter break. And as you can see, we received that in January of each year, pretty much for the last several years. And we just received the third calculation for October, not even to mention February, yesterday at 4 o'clock, and staff is currently going through those numbers to see exactly what we call the bomb damage assessment, to see where we are, particularly on the traditional side. That will affect our comparisons to third calculation to what the final legislative conference report, when that is issued, to make sure that we have an accurate gauge on either funding increases or decreases as we move forward. So again, just to note that as of February 26, when we put this together, we did not receive a third calculation that is certified. So the numbers I'm about to share with you are preliminary numbers. So we've been tracking our FTE by survey from around February of 2021. As you know, we count our students twice, February and October. So as you can see, if I go back to February of 2021, our district overall was 18,057.40. If you jump all the way to October of 2024, it's 18,984.95. So you would think that we would be growing. But when you look at the traditional charters and scholarships and stratify that, you can see that in February of 2021, we were at 16,455.23, and preliminarily, as of October, we're at 16,062.35. Now, the big, I would say, downward trend occurred right around in October of 2023, where we were at 16,469.47, dropped to 16,146.44, and we pretty much have not really recovered from that loss of FTE in that time frame. So the total unweighted FTE, including charters, traditional charters, scholarships, decreased by 134.15 overall, but the traditionals from February of 2024 through October of 2024 decreased by that 109.53. So graphically, when you look at a graph, you can see the bars that since, and what I did was I color-coded anything that is an increase you would see in green, whereas a decrease would be in red. So the school district of Martin County, traditional schools, has not increased our FTE since February of 2016-17. Gone through all those surveys. So looking at a school-by-school analysis, you can see, for example, in elementary, which was very nice to see that we've actually had some overall growth in elementary from February of 24 to October preliminary of 24 of about 175.29 FTE. So that was very, very good to see that there was some growth, where Warfield Elementary had your largest growth of 53.53 FTE, and unfortunately Pinewood had the largest loss of 20.17 FTE. At middle school, all middle schools lost FTE. As you can see, we lost 272.90 FTE, with your largest loss at Hidden Oaks Middle School. Further in the presentation, I will talk about some of the things that we're looking at for middle school to try to not only retain some of our students who are moving from 5th grade forward, as well as some surveys and things that the Instructional Services Department has been discussing in terms of trying to get some of that FTE back. High schools, Jensen Beach High School continues to grow. Matter of fact, last Friday I met with the operations team looking at some drawings where we're looking at converting some of their lab spaces and other spaces to classrooms to accommodate the future growth. But as you can see, Martin County High School lost 52.34 FTE from February of last year to October. Overall, I would say 26.70 is fairly flat, or if not flat. Excuse me. So at high school, we're fairly stable there. Virtual program. We started the Martin County virtual franchise, picked up about 5.67 FTE. Again, I'll go into further detail on a further slide yet to come. Looking at special centers, Spectrum picked up 23.73 FTE, while Willoughby lost 20.18 FTE. So your largest gain and your largest loss over the February FTE occurred at those two areas. When you look at your charters, Indiantown High School, they're at about 91.01 FTE as of October. As I mentioned, we will be in our projections for next year. We'll be adding a few more students there. And at Treasure Cove Classical Academy, they actually lost about 14.85 from February of last year to our preliminary October numbers. Again, these are preliminary numbers. Once we were able to download our reports back from the state, because they have recalibrated the information, but from what we're seeing, it's not very far off. When you look at scholarships, again, scholarships have exploded. Our preliminary number for October is 1374.75. When you look at the graph, you see $18.6 million, but that is based on 1,970.75 unweighted FTE and not the 1374. But I wanted to give everyone a sense of the flow of funds through the district with respect to our scholarship or voucher programs. So coming into this afternoon's presentation, I wanted to give the board and the public a sense of what the budgetary impact is for not making our projections, as well as on top of that losing FTE. So if you look at the box at the very top, you'll see we projected to the state 19,754. That is the document that we signed off and submitted to the state last year, similar to what we're doing this year in terms of looking at our FTE. So when you look at the preliminary October 24-25, for example, we projected to the state in a traditional 16,135, but we came in at 16,062, so we're short of projection about 73. Using total funds per student of about 9,541, which is a combination of state and local funds together, we will be looking at a loss of about $696,000. Charters would be the same thing at about $744,198. I'm going to pause and explain myself with respect to vouchers, and I put that in red. The voucher program, as you notice, is 1375, which was our preliminary number, and the projection to the state was 1993. So because those funds are a pass-through to the district, and we don't see a dollar of those funds, in planning the 24-25 budget, we took out all those revenues. We know we're not going to get any of that 18 million that you saw in the previous slide, so we dropped our revenues. It came down to about $11.7 million. So because it's a pass-through, I'm not standing in front of the board this afternoon to say we got to cut $7.3 million, because that revenue was never included in our budget. So when you look at combination of where I put the letter A and letter B, it adds up to about $1.4 million. However, referring to budget book page 160 and going back to last year, we always set aside those funds until we see what we call internally the whites of their eyes. So the student doesn't materialize, we've already set those monies aside to make sure that when we don't make our projection, then those funds can be returned to the state. So I set aside about $1.3 million. So we're short about $100,000, which we will surgically go into the budget and make that adjustment. The second box that you see on the bottom is not only did we not make projection, but we went in reverse. We lost 110 students based on what we had in 23-24 in February at 16,172 rounded, and we came in at 16,062 in the traditional public school sector. However, we don't have to cut that $1 million that I'm showing, the $1,049,510, because coming into the fiscal year, we had already started the process of reducing our allocations to offset that anticipated loss. So based on those two, we had already reduced our allocations. We know that there's some adjustment to come. Once we get the third calc, and we're going through that, but we do have those funds reserved and set aside to protect us. Budgetary challenges, as we approach this budgetary year, we are seeing some movement in the property casualty, sovereign immunity caps. It's a little premature at this point because This is still being discussed in the legislature. Obviously, we still have challenges with declining enrollment in declining unweighted FTE in our traditional schools. We also, again, there's a lot of work been done with the off blocks, but we still have some more work to be done there. And I know Mr. LaBarbera and his team are still looking at various options. As you saw a moment ago, the FTE at middle schools is particularly of a concern. And I know just in broad terms that Mr. LaBarbera and his team are also looking at the virtual and Martin County School District virtual franchise, looking at those fifth graders. On the 14th of March, next Friday I believe it is, we'll be going up to Brevard to take a look at their program and how they're administering it to get some of those best practices. We're looking at doing some outreach to students via some surveys, to looking at current students, past students, marketing our specialty programs, looking at feeder schools, and maybe even having signing nights moving on from fifth grade to middle school. Some of the other challenges, of course, are inflationary impacts on the pricing of goods and equipment. I just put a little excerpt of an article where the transportation director from Marion County was talking about that a 77-seater passenger bus is now about $160,000, whereas in 2020 it was about $105,000. So we continue to see those price escalations hit us as we go through the subsequent years. And not to forget that next year we also have the 25-26 textbook adoption. Next year we'll be looking at personal financial literacy from 9 through 12, the ELA intervention materials from K through 3, and math intervention materials through K through 4. I know the adoption committee is in the process of meeting, and once we have some numbers from the publishers, we'll be bringing those numbers back to the board, hopefully by the next time we talk about this next month. I'm going to jump, if you mind, to slide number 21 and then come back to 20. Again, I mentioned this is maybe a little bit premature, but with the sovereign immunity caps, the current caps are $200,000 for individual claim per incident, $300,000 for multiple claims arising from the same incident, and the proposal is to move that to $1 million, $3 million. So what we've done is that we've given you a worst-case scenario that based on the district's proportionate share in our SCREMP pool, it would be about $146,000, which is in House Bill 301. And going back to slide 20, it was just a possibility of looking at a legislative change to include some words in the definition of what casualty actually means. It is referred to on your attachment D in your handout on where item number B, where liability insurance could be included at some point. Again, it's a little premature because this is being discussed in the legislature and going through the process. As developments happen, we will update you on that. The next slide is on slide 22. What we did was we wanted to give the board a sense of what the governor's recommended budget, what that would mean for Martin County School District. However, as I mentioned, we did not have the October count yet. We just received that late yesterday afternoon. And so what we did some backwards math. We took out all the voucher, unweighted FTE. We knew what the base student allocation was. We worked our way back into it. Typically, the governor's recommended budget on a yearly basis is the most rosy forecast going into the session. So if you go to slide number 23, you can see an overall increase of about $5.8 million, which again is typically the largest forecast. Interestingly enough, on the previous slide, they are reducing the ESE guaranteed allocation that we're going to talk a little bit about once I go further through the process. On slide 24, this is for the benefit of the newer board members that the state, we don't really control our own millage rate. The state actually sets our own millage rate. And if you notice the tax roll in 24-25, that alone went up by 8%, but you can see the inverse relationship between the tax roll and the required local effort, which is part of the reason why we had to go out to our voters in 2018 and ask for the authority to levy up to 0.50 mills for operational purposes. So as I mentioned before, with respect to the virtual program, we worked with Step Up for Students. They had a charter school conference between November 19th and 21st last year, where they discussed this issue where school districts now have the opportunity to bill parents that have taken a voucher for their students to attend private school, homeschool, that sort of thing. And so what we did was we worked through the process. We set up a banking, put in a new bank account to set up the banking information. And right now, the next steps that we're going through is to determine the appropriate courses for 25-26. And we're currently, Mr. Barber, once again, and his team are collecting data on the appropriate courses that we could be able to offer next year going forward. So I wanted to share that with the board that has been done. So the 25-26 budget is under construction. All departments, the budget files have been distributed to leaders. We have received some of them back. We're requesting a 30% reduction in expenses, but I wanted to point out a special exception, which is special education. A couple things there, and I know that's a lot of writing there, but the Code of Federal Regulation 300.203, which is attachment A in your packet, looks like this. It shows it says that the state educational agency, the SEA, must determine if the local education agency budgets for the education of children with disabilities at least the same amount from at least the following sources. So you can do your test using local funds only. You can do the combination of state and local funds, and then you can do local funds on a per capita basis or state and local combined on a per capita basis, which the per capita calculation is the most generous calculation. The compliance standard is on the same document, and we meet the standard if we do not reduce the level of expenditures for the education of children with disability, at least from the following sources, as I mentioned. There are two exceptions in the law, 204 and 205. 204 is in attachment B, and it talks about the exceptions where you may have a voluntary departure or retirement, or a departure for just cause of special education related services personnel, a decline in your FTE, or maybe you had some high costs in the prior year, maybe you purchased some equipment that you're not purchasing in the subsequent year, then those are allowed as exceptions. And finally, in item attachment C is another adjustment for local fiscal effort that you can pursue, which is, in English, all of that means is if your IDEA budget goes up from one year to the next, let's say just for math purposes, it goes up by $100,000 year over year, then you are allowed to decrease your local effort by 50% of the increase. When you look at the special education budget, however, they have about a $3.4 million budget, and 3.1 of it is specifically for outside services such as speech and language, etc. So it'd be very difficult to do that, in particular given the guardrails and the protections that are in the federal law. When we looked at ESC, we went all the way back in our budget book to 2013-14, and the ESC population is still around 18% of the total unweighted FTE. So that would present a challenge, but I know that Dr. Estevez and her team are still looking at their budget. The website is being developed. Actually, we set it up. Let me go there real quick. Set it up this afternoon for the website. Look at the screen. Under finance, it says fiscal year budget reductions. And it says 25-26 budget reduction presentations coming soon. So what the thought there is, for every presentation that I come before you, we will have a slide that details finance, operations, whatever, and show our budget reductions to be very transparent. And this is in compliance with the superintendent's order to track, and as publicly said, to track and be transparent about our budget reductions for next year. The allocations methodology, as Dr. Miller had recently spoke at a board meeting, the allocations methodology has been changed from an enrollment-based to FTE-based. In other words, from a count of noses to the actual funds that we receive from the state in order to run the school district. All positions are being reviewed to ensure that staffing is right-sized and efficient as possible. Contracts for services are being evaluated for rebidding. You're doing some of that this afternoon with your medical insurance, but we have already gathered some numbers based on looking at district-wide landscaping. We're seeing some potential savings there, and we'll bring that back at the next budget workshop, as well as local printing. And when we say local printing, we're talking about a full managed print solution that would include, for example, toner, services, support, per copy charges. So I'll be working with the procurement department and the ET department to get that done. Different focus, actually, this year with expenditure accountability being enforced. We're also asking for return on investment for some of the expenditures that departments are undergoing. For example, software, we want to know, are we using it? How many users do we have? What is the benefit that the district is receiving from these expenditures of taxpayer dollars? And finally, I would encourage all board members to review the 24-25 budget book that shows all departments, all expenditures by fund, every single penny for the last, since 2018-19. You can see a historical depiction of all the expenditures for all projects and all programs. On February 24th, we received some information from the Florida Department of Education. And in your packet is a copy of the governor's executive order for your bedtime reading. And we received this information, and in there it highlights, amongst other issues, establishing the Florida State DOGE Task Force, unused federal dollars. And I wanted to give the board and the public a sense of what would that kind of look like. So when you look at the chart, you can see Title I, Title III, IDEA Part B, and all the various programs. And where those numbers are coming from is at the end of the grant period, we are required to send in a report to the Florida Department of Education. It's called a FA 399. So one would be tempted to look at that and says, well, this is the undisbursed balance at the end of the fiscal year. However, it's very important for us, for the board and the public, to know that these roll forward balances contain planned spending. And the roll forwards are applied for and included in the subsequent year's funding. These undistributed balances could also include hard to fill positions that we've advertised for and are unable to fill them, and vacant positions, indirect costs. And I know that grants management, through Mr. LaBarber's office, meets with the schools, and in January about each year, and they switch to their alternative planning. Okay, we got a plan B, so now we got to see how we can best utilize those funds. On the final slide, legislative, Senate Bill 166, which was actually heard yesterday and passed through the Pre-K through 12 Education Committee. Line 1274 of Senator Simon's bill says that the DOE shall make funds from Title I, II, and III available to the LEAs, which is us, for the full period of availability for federal funds. What I did was I just took a sample to the right of one of our grant award letters, and I know it's very small, but I can just tell you it's for only 1 year. The full period of availability under the Code of Federal Regulations is 24 months. So that's 2 years. So that gives us more time to spend these funds. And I would say that if after 2 years we have these funds and we don't spend them all, that's on us. So I just wanted to show that. In addition, I've also given you some roll forward numbers for Title I, II, and III in the box to the left. as well as to let you know that sometimes we don't actually get these award letters until we're actually in the fiscal year, and it makes it difficult to plan when you're in the fiscal year and you're now being awarded those funds. So you can see from 21-22 all the way through 24-25, in 24-25, we got our Title I award letter in October. And you know we start our fiscal year on July 1. So, Madam Chair, board members, members of the public, thank you for having me this afternoon. What I'd also like to do, if you have any questions on what I call the long spreadsheet, you will notice that there's a slight variation between some of the numbers that you see in the February FTE calculations, but you'll notice at the top of the chart it says final, because sometimes the DOE makes adjustments to our FTE after the fiscal year is over, and we are actually into the next fiscal year. They do a little final adjustment. So, but again, the trend is the same. If you go all the way down to subtotal traditional public schools, you will see we have not had any green since around fiscal year 2016-17, and we have lost FTE traditionally over the last several years. Once we have the final numbers, I will bring those back to you next month, and we will be able to do that reconciliation, and I will show you the full impact. But from what we're seeing, it appears that we do have enough reserved at this point in our budget, so I don't have to come back with any drastic cuts.
Ms. Powers, did you have a question?
I'm just, because it's a federal grant and their fiscal year doesn't start in October, we're never going to get a notice of award prior to their fiscal year beginning. So, I mean, we deal with that too, because our fiscal year is
They're 10-1, yes.
July 1 to June 30th. But the way the notice of award comes, we get our notice of award in June, but it's like already calculated. I'm not saying you.
Oh.
I'm just talking about how DOE works in other areas with the federal grant. We're never going to know truly, because you're working within 2 fiscal years. It's not, we're always going to get that notice of award in October because.
Which makes it even more difficult to plan, because you never know what that final number will be. So
Right.
I'm just making that point to show that there is, correct, a time difference between when we actually have our numbers, okay, this is what I'm working with, versus trying to figure out, okay, maybe I'm going to get this roll forward, and okay, they're going to take a 15% maybe. So it's difficult to administer the grant. I think with a full 24 months, and you know exactly what your numbers are, then you can make more plans. You can then strategically decide, okay, I've got more time to spend this, so now I know exactly how to administer the fund.
Ms. Russell, do you have any questions? Dr. Moriarty? Lee? No? I have one.
Yes.
In your smaller presentation, you talked about losses at Willoughby and Spectrum.
Yes. at the
Were
special
they
centers.
absorbed into other schools in the district, or did those students leave our district completely?
I would have to follow up and find that out for you, but as of the October count, and you know, during survey week, as long as you show up once, then you're counted. So at that specific point in time, that FTE, those students were at those locations, but I can follow up with you and see if they went back to their home schools.
Because then if they did, it wasn't really a loss in the district, it was
Right.
just a loss at
It's
those
just a-
schools.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Carter, appreciate it.
Well, and just for those schools like Spectrum, typically the bad behavior starts because a lot of kids that go there are going there because of their behavior. So you tend to see enrollment higher later in the year,
Right.
not in the beginning of the year,
Right.
the school year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
We're up to discussion items, but I did want to say that with the board's approval, to perhaps discuss some percent reductions in our school board budget as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. Maybe we can come up with some ideas at a later board meeting to discuss that. Maybe come at the next workshop, Diane, maybe a discussion, if everyone else is amenable to that, some things that we can do. to pitch in as well.
Well, I think if it's a 30% across the board, it's across the board, including our, whatever, I mean, whatever our budget is, it should be the same for our budget as well as everybody.
Right, but don't we have to, as a board, decide what those cuts should be, or does the district make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, we have authority over the entire budget. But
Right.
if we said, okay, we want to cut travel, or we want to cut, certain areas that are,
Okay, so I
So I'm
don't
good with
want to,
that.
I don't want to make a blanket decision. I want everybody to weigh in and decide what areas we can cut. So thank you. Very briefly, I wanted to bring back up, I had spoken back in, I believe, November, when we were discussing the Veterans Day, that I would like to see a proclamation for the month of November be Veterans Month, and have the district schools across the board do projects, have assemblies, events planned for the entire month, have the teachers be creative and honor our veterans, because I just think it's the right thing to do. So I wanted to know if you all were willing to support that. I would have Jen bring it up to an agenda, because I did furnish her with a framework of what one looked like, but by all means, I think we should all have the language that we like. But in addition, I'm asking each of you if you have any proclamations that you would like to bring forward for specific months of the year. Something to think about. I think it's well worth the time and effort for, a multitude of things. We could have a Parents Appreciation Month. We could have a Teachers Appreciate, whatever we want to do, bring it forward and we can discuss it and assign months of dedication to specific things in our district. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move right along here to school board policies. Before I begin, is there anyone in the audience that would like to public comment on any of these policies that we are bringing forward? Seeing none. 6.01, 1231, outside activities of administrators. No? Anybody care to make a motion?
oh, we're not voting.
Oh, okay, so we're just moving through these? Okay. I'll get the hang of it. Okay. Okay, so no discussion on that, all right. So 1602, 2420, school patrol. This policy is being rescinded. Any discussion? Seeing none. 6.03, 3231, outside activities of staff. This is a new policy. Do I have any comments or discussion on this?
I have one question for Mrs. Falls. So normally the thousands, the 3,000s and the 4,000s go together, but there's no 4,000 to this one? Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks.
Okay, 6.04, 5410.01, promotion, acceleration, placement, and retention. Any discussion on this? Seeing none. 6.05, 5505, academic honesty. This is a new policy. Any discussion?
I have one thing on that one. I know that it talks about in here that it's supposed to be included, violation of the policy is supposed to be included in the code of conduct. So I just wanted to be sure that we had the heads up on that, because if this moves in accordance with the calendar, it will be approved. If it manages to get approved before the code of conduct is done for next year, you need to keep that in mind.
Microphone.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks, everyone. We were made aware that that could be coming along, so should that pass or when that passes, we would bring that back for an amendment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have 6.065610, removal, out-of-school suspension, disciplinary placement, and expulsion of students. Any comments on this policy? Sure.
Okay, so on page 3. So it talks about, one of the things that I know we've talked a lot about is parental involvement. And there is an informal hearing, but no notifying parents before a suspension. And I think it says somewhere in the statute that we'll make every effort to work with parents on behavior before we start suspending children, but there is no, there's nothing in here about notifying the parent. So I think that that's important. I also have a problem, and we've had this in the past and brought it up, is that when you have a, like if you have an infraction, and there have been some crazy things that we have, children have been suspended for, and if you start the suspension the very next day, there is no time to even involve the parent to intervene. So they go home, the parent is notified in writing. What I think that I agree with every single option that says if they agree to get email or text messages, they need to be, and a phone call needs to be, they need to be contacted other than sending a letter by mail. Because I think a lot of the statute says that by mail, and we know that it probably would take a week to get to them. But I'm just really concerned about the lack of notifying the parent before we're suspending a child. That was that. And then there was one other, there is some discrepancy in the completing their work. In one, and I didn't write down the paragraph, but in one place it says that if you get out of school suspension, you can make up your work as long as you do it within 5 days. And then there's another one that says it doesn't even give the number of days. So if the principal does the maximum suspension of 10 days and we're only going to give them 5 days to make up their work, I mean, but we're sending them home the very next day. How are they going to get their work to do the work while they're on the suspension? And then they only have 5 days to do it when they get back. I think we need to think that through a little bit more.
Would you like it to be consistent with that 5 days, or is there discussion for a different number of days so that we can, when we update it, to bring it back? Should it be 5 days, 5 days? Because the other place I've notated where it doesn't say any days, to your point, so I just want to be.
Well, I think it's really tough to put in those very, very limiting. It should be at the discretion. I mean, there should be a little bit of discretion, but there should be something, because if a student is out for 5 days and they didn't get any of their work to do while they were gone, and then they come back to school and they're doing their work to keep up in the class plus making up work, what is reasonable? I don't know. I don't want kids to fail because they couldn't get everything done in 5 days when they come back. So I think it depends on the circumstance. Did they get their work? Were they going to? I don't know. I just think we need to think through that a little bit more.
So my question is, when they are suspended, is there something that they are sent home? Is that something that happens in the schools, or it's different at every, don't know.
Madam Chair, we're just looking at the approved student progression plan, and there is a section, it just cued me, I remembered it was changed a little while ago. Makeup assignments and assessment, students who are absent from class regardless of reason will be required to make up classwork and or tests. According to School Board Policy 5200, the student will have a reasonable amount of time, up to 1 day for each day of absence, to complete makeup work. Principals may grant extensions to the makeup time limit for extenuating circumstances. Students assigned to in-school suspension, it continues, that they're all to make up work. And I seem to recall principals sharing a concern. They wanted to make sure that students had ample time, but also were held to the standard of when you miss work, you need to make it up. And so that was something that had been adjusted not too long ago.
So I think we should mimic that language in in this policy as well, so that
Agreed.
it's consistent. Because there is another place where it doesn't even have days, just says you can make it up. It doesn't give the very, okay. I am fine with that language.
Was that all you had on that policy, Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So that's on page 3 of 7, down towards the bottom, the next to the last paragraph that starts with that, and then it's in the middle of page 4 of 7. Also on page 3 of 7, it has that the principal will send formal written notice to the student, parent, or guardian by U.S. mail. You did not indicate whether you wanted us to check or other method agreed to by the parent. You had said in other policies that are in this deck that you wanted that box checked or other method agreed to by the parent, so I'm assuming that you want that checked. My question is, when and how does a parent agree to this other method? Is that something when they're doing their forms at the beginning of the year that says, yeah, send me a text message, send me an email message, et cetera? So if that's the case, and I'm sure that somehow we're tracking that, if we get bounced back emails, if we get something, and I don't know whether there's a way to track delivery of that email to be sure that that email actually gets to them, so that if we're using the other method agreed to by the parent, and the parent says, yeah, you can use an email, in all the cases in these policies, I hope that we're going to be able to document that they actually opened it or that they received it and did something so that we know that they actually got the notification. Is that?
We can certainly track if if people that work in the district have opened emails, but to be able to confirm it with other mail, like Gmail or Yahoo providers, that would be a challenge. So I can ask our network team to look into that further, but that would be a challenge to assume that they did indeed open it.
Mr. Adrian, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can I ask Dr. Adrian a question? When, and I'm actually looking to you, but I'll also look over to the other side over here, in focus, if a parent puts in an email address and we send them an email notification of some sort using that email address that they provided, if it bounces back that it did not go through because it's an incorrect email address or they're no longer using that email,
Yes.
are we notified of that?
We could see that, yes.
Okay.
So like if their email address had a 2.3 and we put a 2.2 and we sent it, we get a bounce back if it was not delivered to that specific email address, provided it's not a legit email address.
So essentially, we could run a report of emails that were bounced back, and staff at the school could contact those parents for either an updated email address or a different form of method of communication.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, and I go to Mrs. Powers' comment of as you're starting a suspension and not letting the parent know that, obviously if you use the mail, that's going to take a couple days to get to them, but you probably have a pretty good chance of it getting to them. And I'm concerned with this or other method agreed to by the parent, that they're just going to. And I realize that, yeah, a parent has to open it, but I mean, I think that it's.
Well, and I think that its wording is, I think we have to say that we will make every effort to contact the parent via phone, email, regular mail. Like if your child's being suspended, you're going to want to know that. I would want to receive a call at work or on my cell phone, or get a text message that said, this is what's happening. Do you want to come to the school right now? It just gives parents the opportunity to be involved in that process and to understand it, because I know that a lot of kids, they don't get the full story unless.
Yeah, and I'm just worried when it's a formal written notice and it's we can either use US mail or we can send, if the parent said, send me an email, we can send an email and they never really get notified. I mean, and I almost feel like that paragraph on page 3, besides the formal written notice, it does say, in the above paragraph, the principal will make a good faith effort to contact the student's parent or guardian by telephone immediately after making the decision to suspend. But the formal notice, I don't know about a formal notice that's going by email. I just don't know.
Well, I think that, and to your point about that language, the phone call should be made before the decision is made to suspend, because
right now
the
it's saying
statute
immediately
says
after.
that we will make every effort to work with the parent to avoid kicking kids out of school. Which, again, off this topic, but I would really like to see our out-of-school suspension data, but also our in-school suspension data and how that is going. And we used to get Cessor data too, that's reported. And I think I'd like to see that data and what we're, I know it's reported. So whenever it's reported, if we could get a copy, if everybody's interested in that.
Can we send this back to Neola and ultimately Terry Harmon, this particular, because I don't think it complies with what the statute says, with the language of after, instead of the statute language that's talking about you're supposed to make an attempt and work with parents. It doesn't mean that a principal is supposed to suspend a kid, then make a phone call and say, by the way, I've suspended your kid and a formal notice is coming to you by email. I think it's.
Yes, ma'am, we will do that, and I'm getting confirmation from Dr. Parendozzi that the directive is they are to make a phone call before any student is suspended, and that call would be documented. We cannot have a student suspended without a parent notification and input, so we do need to get this language updated at the very least to be in alignment with what we're doing.
So is everybody else okay with throwing this one back?
Yeah. Anybody else? 6.07, 5611, due process rights. Any comments?
So I would just add again the parental notification before where the informal hearing and the decision is made, so that the parent can be involved in that process before a decision is made to suspend a student. And I will say, I don't want it to take away from, the discretion of the principal if it's something that the student needs to be immediately removed from the school that's not for safety reasons. But I think our goal should be to not suspend students, and the more parental involvement we have, the better. If they choose not to be involved, that's okay too. But I think we have to give parents the option to be a part of the solution.
I also have a question on this one. In paragraph A, it was stricken. So in paragraph A, for students subject to suspension, the student's going to get a written or oral notice of the charges and an explanation of why they're subject to maybe be suspended. But then we've crossed out the line that says the principal or designee will make a good faith effort to inform a student's parents by telephone of the suspension and reasons for it. So that just seems a little.
Yeah, we will have Mr. Harmon take a look at these, because that was obviously strucken through by Neola, so, and it needs to be in alignment with statute, so.
Well, and I do think it's kind of odd that the principal holds the hearing and makes the decision and then does the appeal as well. Just, they've already made the decision once. Are they gonna go against themselves? I just.
Those two, okay.
Okay, 6.08, 5730, equal access for non-district sponsored student clubs and activities. Any comments?
Hold on one second, let me get to that one. It have. I don't know why I put a note, about on E, it says non-school persons do not direct, conduct, control, or regularly attend the activity. I'm not, like, a parent couldn't come, I don't understand the purpose of that. Is it to prevent, like, a group from coming in and organizing students for, I just think it's kind of weird, the language. But if I understood what the intent was to protect or whatever, I would.
I took the intent to be the same as C, the same way that a district employee isn't promoting, leading, or participating, that we don't want non-school people to be able to do the same thing. Does that?
But if you have a volunteer that comes in because you don't want 8th graders to be on the campus by themselves, if it's a parent, they can't regularly attend a meeting or be there. That's what I just didn't understand. I can definitely say that non-school persons will not promote, lead, or participate in the meeting, but that they can't attend or be in the room.
How do you have Girl Scouts then? Yeah.
Look at that. 6.09, 5780, student parent rights. Go ahead.
Let me find it. Note says it's on page 7. This is another one that has, at the very top of the page, a student may be suspended only as provided in the policy of the district. A good faith effort must be to immediately inform the parent by telephone of the student's suspension and the reason, which goes back to and within 24 hours, let the parent know by mail or by a method agreed to by the parent. I think that goes to the same.
Well, in 24 hours, their kid will have served their one-day suspension. And now, what's the point in telling them after all of that? It's like.
Yeah, I think that paragraph needs some help, the discipline A suspension piece.
Is that it on that? 6.10, 5860, safety patrol. This is a new policy. Any comments? Okay. 6.11, 6210, fiscal planning. Any comments? 6.12, 6310, procurement code of ethics, rescind. Anyone? 6.13, 6322, construction, contracting, and bidding. This is a new policy. Any comments?
I do. On page 2, item F, which talks about day labor contracts not to exceed, raising it from 280 to 600. I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue with the next, in parentheses, thing that says, said amount may be adjusted annually based on changes in the CPI. I'm kind of, who's going to do that? How's that? I mean, so it's almost like you need to peg the 600 as of a certain date and then say something, because otherwise you're never going to, if you pass a policy that says 600, but we can change it according to the CPI, and then it just organically happens, I think does that make sense to you, Mr. Morrison, I guess I would be asking? Just the wording on that.
Yes, I'm actually looking over to Mr. Carver, but I do understand your point with respect to the annual adjustment based on the CPI, and it puts me in the mind of the cost per student station that is in the Florida statutes, that they actually release a chart each year that shows the CPI adjustment to that amount. But let us take that back and just research to make sure.
Yeah, I just think it needs, it needs to be pegged and then change from there. And if it's not just the CPI, if it's the thing that's being given to us by DOE, I think we need to reference that that's where it's coming from, and it's not somebody looking up online, what's the CPI for? Thanks.
6.14, 6334, pre-qualification of contractors for educational facilities construction. This is a new policy. Any comments? 6.15, 6610.01, contracts for operation of vending machines on school property. This is a policy that's being rescinded.
So does that mean there will be no policy for commercially owned or leased vending machines?
8540?
I think we have a new policy,
On the bottom.
6.32.
Okay,
We're not there yet, although I'd love to be.
okay. Thanks.
Sorry. 6.16, instructional materials allocation. 6.17, 6685, funding for promotion, public relations, and hospitality. This is a new policy. Do I have any comments?
I don't know why the green word says and instead of or. Because then it makes it seem like you have to hit all those hurdles. It's not giving you a choice of those hurdles or of those categories. Is that? So if Mrs. Falls can check with Neola and see why they decided to use and instead of or, it just grammatically doesn't seem to convey.
Well, it does
what the-
say may include, but not limited to.
Yeah, and then it gives a whole list and it says and, so it's like we're lumping all those together. It's like it's not limited to, I think it's limited to any of those individually. I don't think it's an and.
Okay. 6.18, 6700, Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. Any comments? 6.19, pre-qualification of contractors. This policy is being rescinded. 6.20, 7430.01, Environmental Health Program. 6.21, 7440.03, Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems. 6.22, 7540.08, Artificial Intelligence, AI. This is a new policy. 6.23, 8110, Business Office, rescind. 6.24, 8130, School Hours, rescind. 6.25, 8215, Media Centers, rescind.
So this has the language about, in K, of objectionable materials being brought to the attention of the principal.
But that's being rescinded.
Yeah, so that's all going away?
Coming back.
This specific Martin policy is going away because we can pick up the Neola policy for the instructional materials. It was just, this one's listed in here specifically about the hours of the media center, the scheduled use, the number of books. There's the Neola policy that picks up the actual process. Which one was it?
So do we consider media center books instructional materials?
You're specifically talking, Mrs. Roberts, about K, objectionable materials,
Yeah.
or J, select both?
J and K, yeah. I'm okay with the A, the B, the C, the D.
Okay, let us
Some of the
check to
books.
make sure that J
That
and
that's
K
somehow
are
covered
covered somewhere
somewhere.
else, and
Yeah.
then we will get back to you, because let us check on that.
Okay, thank you.
6.26, 8220, school day. This is a new policy. 6.27, 8310, public records. 6.28, 8350.01, social security number management. This policy is being rescinded. 6.29, 8401, safety and health loss control program, rescind. 6.30, school safety and security. 6.31, 8406, reports of suspicious activity and potential threats to schools.
I have a question on that one. On page 2, it talks about annually, the district will make available a training for parents and guardians for use on the Fortify Florida prior to the start of each school year or at the time of a student's enrollment if during the school year. Just wanted to highlight that that's something that we need to be sure that we're doing.
Yes, I've got the thumbs up from Chief in the back, and I do know that we had a pretty lengthy discussion about that executive cabinet on how we are proceeding forward with that. Staff watches different videos, and then we also have a training at each of the school sites on how to activate Fortify, which is why we've received an increase in the number of usage and students using it, because that training was conducted this year.
Yeah, so I'm questioning about the training for parents and guardians
So that
prior
was
to the school year and
done via video with Mr. Chief Rangella and the Sheriff's Office together combined, and the video was pushed out via social media on all of our platforms. Frank, is there any other area other than social media where it was pushed out and it met the statutory requirement for parent training on how to activate that as well?
And so also, if during the year we get a student who enrolls, we're giving that to them at the same time? Is that part of the procedure that, Brian's my son, I sign him up in November, he starts coming to school, and now Brian's parents need to be given that training,
That's a good question. So,
right?
Chief, new students coming in that did not receive the initial training on Fortify.
Well, it says they're only required to do it within the first 5 days of each school year.
Frank Frangella, Chief of Safety and Security. So we do have the video on my website on the school district platform that we can make available to parents.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that if this says that it's available and we're telling them at a time of a student's enrollment of during the school year, that we're somehow checking that piece and making sure that that actually happens. I think that 5 days of the school year has to do with students. So I mean, I
Correct.
think that's the first
Yes.
one. But then the second part about the annual training for parents and guardians,
We may be able to link that on the registration and focus as one of the requirements that a parent does during the registration process, similar to the way we do with the
Yeah.
acknowledgement forms. So let us take a look at that.
Okay.
Mrs. Roberts, that's a good point, and that would make it very easy.
And you can track
Include-
if they did in
Yes,
fact watch the video.
yeah.
Okay. And finally, 6.32, 8540, vending machines.
Madam Chair? Can I make a comment about that one?
Sure.
So in E, it says food items, and it goes on to say there's a USDA Smart Snacks in Schools regulations. And if you look, and I did a little digging to actually pull up that list of what the Smart snacks in schools are. And there are some okay options, some different baked options in there, but some of the options on here I notice are very sugary type snacks. There is all kinds of cookies on there. There is breakfast cookies. I never knew that cookies would be for breakfast. Frosted Pop-Tarts, Cocoa Krispies, granola bars. I think that list, we could do better. So I didn't know if our nutrition team could audit that list and take out some of the especially sugary snacks. That would be wonderful.
We actually had a meeting, Dr. Moriarty, with our monthly PTA meeting, and one of the moms, I think, if not two, brought this forward to our attention, and Laura Hamadal was in attendance at that meeting, and she did say that she was going to be looking into their questions. It's very similar to yours in regards to that, and we'll be presenting back out again at our next month's meeting, so hopefully something will come of that, and we can take a look at streamlining that list a little bit tighter.
Thank you.
To comment on that, we also had 2 parents come to our SHAC meeting at the district. They also commented on the exact same thing from Bessie Creek.
Well, and we've had also in the past, specifically red dye, products with red dye, that they were, serving like slushy kind of things, and a lot of parents, red dye impacts their child's energy level, or it can adversely affect them and cause behavioral issues. So I think we're going to see more guidelines on things like that from the new administration as well.
Great.
Do you think Ms. Hamadal would give us a presentation?
Certainly, absolutely. We'll make sure that we'll make arrangements.
If
for that.
everyone would like that, I think that would be a good idea.
A lot of
Well,
great information.
And if you should go and have lunch at the schools, it is so impressive what they do and how beautiful it looks. I'm so impressed by it, like honestly. And the healthy snacks, and the kids are actually eating it. Because the carrots and the celery and all the stuff, the cucumbers that they make into ghosts and stars, and they do a really, really good job. I'm thoroughly impressed.
I think
Maybe they'll bring some snacks.
Well, I think that's
When they come.
Bring
great
snacks.
idea. Dr. Miller will arrange for that. I do know too that she did a very great job in explaining the options to parents to be able to log into the system and place notes in their system's online account, their child's online account, for restrictions. So if there's dietary restrictions, or if there's red dye restrictions, or anything else that a parent does not want their student, it flags it at the register so that the cashier is monitoring what's on the tray before it's taken out of the line or paid for. I think, though, she would love that opportunity to present, and I think that's also an opportunity, too, for her on the record to explain that to a larger audience as well, that there's that option there.
We just don't have that for the vending machines. I think the vending machines are yeah, it's a nutrition issue, but it's separate from what they're serving at the schools. I don't know that they're monitoring what the kids are taking out of vending machines, and who knows? I mean, I used to like Pop-Tarts, but they're bad for you.
It's a good point, and I think through our process of cleaning up some of our contracts and the vending machines that are on our campuses, and we did note Dr. Moriarty's concern with the energy drinks that are available through the vending machines, not from us, but based on what our vendors are placing in those machines, to possibly come up with some restrictions on what we will allow or not allow in those machines. So all coming.
So you're going to pull 8540 and bring it back with different language then? Because otherwise, if we leave it at this, because right now, all it says, as long as you satisfy these conditions, the next paragraph doesn't even give you the right to override those conditions.
We will do that.
So if you pull that one in.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts, yes.
We might want to put, let dentists know they could advertise on our vending machine.
Or a red alarm goes off when they take a certain snack, right? All right, well, thank you, everyone. This was a long one. I am going to adjourn this meeting.